right, everyone, I have the great pleasure of talking to some members of Aviations today. Why don't you guys go around and introduce yourselves and what you do in the band?
Hello, I'm James. I play drums in Aviations, and I guess I'm on the left side of the screen, so I'll know that for orientation in case we have to do around the screen.
I can move it around, but you're in the top. You're in the top left. Richard's on the bottom left, and Sam's on the bottom right.
Checks out.
Or Richard, go. You go.
Go, Richard.
Okay. Hello, my name is Richard. I am the pianist for Aviations.
And my name is Sam. I play guitar and produce for Aviations.
Now, I had a question about Richard then. Do you just play piano in Aviations? Or do you do like keys in general?
I'm really not like a keyboard player. I haven't done a lot of synth work. I can play Rhodes and all that, but I'm a pianist by trade, and if I could bring an actual piano on tour, I would, but we're not at that level, so I play piano on a keyboard. Yeah.
You guys would just drag one behind like a band van.
No. We did that for the music videos, and
pianos are heavy.
Oh yeah. My wife's a classical.
Thank God for Eric.
Yeah, my wife's a classical pianist, and I remember we've had to move her baby grand around a few times, and it's like,
yeah, you got to hire separate movers for that part.
It's no good.
Such a pain.
Well, that's really interesting because, I think in this style of music, everyone expects the keyboardist to be doing like there's some piano, but then like doing synth leads and stuff like that. But I think one thing I really enjoyed about the latest album is how much piano there was on it. Like it's a very different kind of sound,
I enjoyed that too.
Now, did you record an actual acoustic piano?
Yes. Yeah. So we were up at Ghost Hit Studios. They had a Yamaha S6 up there.
Yep.
Which is neat because like for a lot of like sort of typical studio standard pianos, you get like a Yamaha C7, which is their standard, 7-foot grand.
Yeah.
But the S series has duplex scaling and a couple other like sort of more strategies that they've implemented to sort of get like a thicker, more orchestral sound out of it as much as they can. It still sounds like a piano and it felt great and all that, but just nice to get a slightly different timbre.
Yeah, very cool.
But yeah,
really big room too. It was the studio was built in a let's say abandoned or repurposed church, so just really, really high ceilings. So a handful of like the room mics we had thrown around the room were actually pretty useful for some of the softer, more exposed moments, which is kind of fun byproduct of a cool studio.
Yeah, that is very cool. I mean, piano is, if you're going to do acoustic piano, you got to mic it properly. That's like a big part of doing it.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And we're still learning.
No, but that's cool that you did that though, because I feel like so many bands, and especially doing metal, like more heavier stuff, are just using virtual piano. So.
Yep.
Hey Richard, how do you feel about virtual pianos?
I think if it's buried deep in a texture, you do what you got to do. But if you're writing like exposed piano parts, like, to someone who's a pianist, and I'm sure your wife would agree, like fake piano sounds really obviously fake 98% of the time.
Yeah.
I've been fooled once or twice. I think like first time listening to the Hollow Knight soundtrack, Christopher Larkin does a really good job with that. And I heard like actually like someone got like they did like Alicia's Keys. They got that piano to sound amazing once. I don't even remember what album it was.
Once, to be clear.
Yeah, but so a lot of times people are like, oh, well, it sounds fine. Well, it's like, how much time have you spent sitting at the instrument? Like, it sounds fine to you. Like, I don't play guitar. If I exported a Guitar Pro solo that I wrote, and I was like, oh, it sounds fine, you guys would laugh at me. So,
Then you'd be like plenty of other metal guitarists out there.
That is the album.
Yeah. Did you just like export MIDI and then run it through Neural DSP?
Yeah, no one can play any of that stuff. It's we spent a lot of time.
I'm curious, if you have to use virtual piano for a tour, what are you going to use?
That's a good question. So, I think there is a time and a place for Keyscape. Everybody loves Keyscape. It sounds good, really, right out of the box. My issue with it is that, like, that's one piano sound, and it's very specific. Like, if you want that Keyscape sound, it's awesome. if you want something a little clankier, a little, more rotund of a sound, then, I've used like Synthagy's Ivory VSTs before, but some of those things like Ivory, I think is probably too hefty to bring on the road, just because I don't think I have a laptop that would run it that well. So I've been messing around with Piano Tech, which is a modeler rather than a sampler. And that's come a long way. And yeah, it's got like a little bit of thinness to the sound sometimes, but it's got a lot of flexibility. So I could create like a bunch of different patches for various sections and switch between them. So I might dig deeper into that, I think.
Cool.
Quick fun fact about you mentioned Synthagy, is it the brand? Yeah, we used a bit of the lowest like strings because our guitars for this album, and in some cases the bass, would tune down to an A or an A flat. But the A track specifically we would make use of the lowest A on a piano to actually double some guitar lines or bass lines, because our bassist Werner, who plays Dingwall basses exclusively at the moment, those actually have a very pianish kind of sound to them, and it blending with that low string actually worked really well. So I would augment some of the stuff that we would record with Richard with some Synthagy low piano for specific patches, and it's a cool sound.
Yeah, piano's an underrated sound to double guitars, I think. Like, it has like really good transient information, especially in the low end. You can like double riffs and low chugs and stuff. It sounds awesome.
It's rich.
Yeah.
Like Richard.
Yeah.
It's, it's that was the meme with the light years, it's the articulatory reinforcement.
Yeah.
Because it's pitched percussion, like that is sort of the decisions that I make or we make as a band. Is like, okay, in this riff, do we want piano to double? Do we want piano to add something textural? Do we want it to add harmony? And, I think we sort of fell in love with that a number of years ago, and then have just branched out from there.
I believe if I heard it right, there sounded like there was some prepared piano stuff in some point. Did you do any of that? Or did someone just go in and like mute?
Yeah, I mean, we prepared sort of jerry-rigging it in the studio when we were recording. So yeah, there's 2 songs that have really damped, muffled piano to get that sort of thumpy, funky stuff. We, we're like running around trying to figure out what we were going to use to weight down the strings, because we had like, some cloth and all that on top of the strings. And we ended up using a laptop as a weight at one point, most expensive paperweight known to man. So
cool.
Good stuff.
All right, enough about the piano. So
thank you. Yeah, I'm honored.
you can leave now. No,
okay. All right.
So when did the band...
Let's focus on the cat.
So who are some of the original members of the band, and where and when did you guys start?
James, you want to go for that?
I mean, I guess original members would be myself, Sam, and our vocalist Adam. We all met at, excluding Richard down there. The 3 of us met at Berklee College of Music in Boston. In like 2012.
Okay.
So yeah, from there, like, I mean, it was like kind of a lot of experimentation, especially when you're at that school, because like everyone's running around doing like 8 million things that are all sick. So it kind of just came from that. Sam and I actually met before college at a like a Berklee summer school thing called Berklee 5 Week, which was funny because like at the time I thought like having that experience was super sick, because it was kind of just like a half a semester, I guess, of just like kind of vibing out all the music classes. None of the
at Berklee, by the way. Yeah,
at Berklee. So so that was kind of cool. And then from that, I think Sam and I like remained in contact, on our senior year of high school. And then when we got to Berklee, it just so happened that we were on the same floor. So I'd kind of like see him in passing every day. And we just ended up kind of like trading like guitar profiles over that first like year of school. And then we played our first show the second year of college, right? Am I crazy?
I'm pretty sure our first show was the day we released the album. And it was just chaos.
But that was our second year. That was our second year of school, right? Because it was like
October 2012. And we started
October 10th.
There you go.
Damn.
A few days after.
I'm pretty sure it was October 13th.
13th,
But,
yes.
All right. Damn.
Which was a few days after Parallax 2 feature sequence.
Wow.
Because my distinct memory of being at college with James, we were living together at that point as of September that year, was finishing up that album, getting ready for our first show, all just the chaos of all these things we should not have been doing in 1 week. And James going in the other room to listen to this Between the Buried and Me album front to back while I'm like comping some vocals or something. Again, 4 days before the album is to be done. And he came out about an hour later, however long that record is, just a changed man.
I don't remember.
If there's a new BT Bam record, you have to listen to it right away. There's no waiting for that.
Exactly. Whatever notes James had for he's like, I gotta go do this. And
Well,
yeah.
I think that was just like a really cool time, just as like in my journey as a musician, because like
And for music in general.
there is literally nothing like going to Berkeley. Like it's just like the fact that I was allowed to just be like all in for like 5 years and not have to worry about anything else and just be like, oh, I can I can justify like going to listen to a record for an hour, and like this is like part of my education is like insane to me. And like the fact that we got to do that was like really cool. I mean, we got this band out of it and all that, so it was definitely very
It's even weirder that it feels normal after a year or two, being able to just walk down the street and like pass by all these insane players and be like, oh, actually, I need somebody for my project. We're doing this sound-alike where we're supposed to sound like a funk band, or like, you know, God forbid, a Between the Buried and Me sound-alike is a project where you copy a song. I think Adam and I ended up recording a This Town Needs Guns sound-alike because we were into the math rock thing, and his voice sounded great, and James also played on it. So like just so strange and normalized that you can be doing music all the time. And that leads into like how we met some of the other members. Like Eric was a guitarist just who shared a guitar recording class. He happened to bring in an example of something he just recorded. I think that was literally the assignment, was bring in something you recorded with your guitar, and he like programmed some drums to it. So me hearing that, like fully, this guy was like already having like arranging songs, was like, I needed to talk to this person. And then all of a sudden, like a few days later, we had another member right there. So like stuff like that would just happen every other week at Berkeley.
Yeah, and Berkeley's a school that's full of, you know, people doing more modern styles of music, you know. I had like a traditional classical music experience more. I mean, there was people doing modern stuff, but like I have a classical guitar degree, and you know, so I didn't really meet a lot of people doing metal, you know, when I went to school. But you're right about the experience of doing music all the time when you're in school. It's so different from, at least for me as an adult now. Like before I came to interview guys, I'm like, I should probably listen to the album a few times through, but my life is so busy. It's like I had to listen to it in spots, you know, like 2 songs here and then 2 songs there, and so it's just weird. I would love to be able to sit down and just listen to music, but it doesn't happen as much anymore, unfortunately.
Do you still play classically?
Sometimes, yeah. I don't do it a ton.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll play at a fancy restaurant or for a wedding ceremony or something like that. But,
I've always wanted to play. I've played one movement of the Manuel Ponce Sonata for Guitar and Harpsichord. So if you ever want to, I've got a harpsichord, and I just need a.
Give me like a couple years to get my classical chops back.
You and me,
pretty nice harpsichord we got.
You have an actual harpsichord back
dude.
there. That's amazing. If I need actual harpsichord recorded on something, I'll let you know.
You let me know.
Great, that's cool. So this is your third full-length album, then, right?
Yeah.
How do you pronounce?
Yes,
how do you pronounce the
always-
album? The name of the album. I feel like I'm gonna mess.
I
it
would
up.
say Luminaria,
Luminaria.
for anyone asking. And my nerdy reason is that like an aria is a musical term, and you know, also sounds nicer. So yeah. And I was about to say, and I named it. No, our bass player actually named it. I always think that's a fun bit of information because we're so, as you can tell, detail oriented with our approach to the music. There's a lot going on, and we probably, you know, rocked some names around in our brains for years, honestly. And our bassist came in one meeting and said, you know, I've been thinking about this name Luminaria sounds pretty cool. his absolute first pitch, probably like some of the first words in that meeting. And I was like, that's actually pretty cool. And the more we thought about it that day, it was like, yeah, I think this will stick.
Is the name?
That was like 36 hours before we announced the actual album.
Right.
Yeah, leave that.
Because we were like, okay, with this single, we gotta announce the album. Yeah.
Does the name have anything to do with any of the songs or anything like that? Or is it just a...
I think for me, it's as much a like evocative name as like Aviations is. So like if your perspective of like metal or like song naming in general is kind of cynical and it's like, oh, they just kind of threw it up and like, what does that mean or whatever? That's one way to look at it. But for me, like Aviations being born, I'll take the L. We're born out of the pluralization boom of the early 2010s, the monuments, the structures, the periphery got away without an S somehow. But for us, the Aviations thing, I feel like it feeds into that sort of like uplifting sound we got. And I'll say Luminaria is a similar vibe to that. It's pretty much a combination of like Lumen is kind of like the warmth side of it, and Aria is like the music. So like warm music, cozy metal, if you want to like get super literal with it. That's a term that a lot of our fans have been calling our music, and makes a lot of sense because as we were like playing some of those first shows that James mentioned, like our first one being right when our album first came out, like we would get put on bills with bands that were either super, super heavy or like not at all. And we were kind of in the middle. Like we play really distorted guitars, but we're not that intimidating. We don't scream. So it does feel like that cozy metal, Luminaria, all that is kind of feeding into the sound you get.
But there is some heaviness that you guys do. I mean, there's a few harsh vocals here and there. But I think cozy metal, that's actually a pretty good descriptor. What do you think, if you had to explain why or what makes it cozy metal, what would you say makes it cozy metal?
I would put Richard on the spot again and say that the piano actually adds a lot to that sound. One other like more technical aspect of it, I think, is some of the guitar tones we go for. We try to focus on making sure the notes and the chords are really audible, if that makes sense. So like tempering how much distortion we're throwing on something. And I mentioned that just because we get a lot of comments on YouTube, for example, that of people saying, hey, that clean guitar sounds really cool. Like, what did you do with that? And I'm going back and listening to that timestamp they maybe called out. And it's like, that's a fully distorted double track guitar performance, like arresting my ears. I'm not sure what you're talking about. And it's just because it has that like stringy and like very melodic sound. It's not being muddied up by the typical production you would get in like a very heavy metal situation. And I think the piano, and like I mentioned before, Werner and his Dingwall basses, like all of that information is pushing that like mission forward of just like the notes and the chords and all this layering we're doing, and the vocals, there's like layers upon layers, like all of that is adding to this what I consider heavy, to be honest, not necessarily needing it to be screaming or like super distorted or low tuned to be heavy, but all of those layers adding like that like emotional heaviness, I think, is probably what makes it more cozy.
It's dense, that's for sure. Like
yes.
When I listen to it, like anything in this genre generally takes a couple listens to kind of like get into, the songs and stuff. But as I'm listening, I'm like, oh, there's vocals here, but then there's also like every instrument's doing a bunch of runs and stuff underneath. But yeah, I think the nature of the sounds you're using allow all the notes to kind of like pop out. So that's a good descriptor. What are you using for tones for guitars on this album?
All neural DSP.
Okay. That's great,
baby. Yeah, no, we're big fans of them. I think on our last EP release, which was a re-release of a couple of songs from that first album that James and I worked on when we met at Berkeley, that was a split of Axe Effects and Neural DSP, and we'll leave those to who want to go listen to it to decide which is which. But it was a cool like test for me to kind of see which ones would hold their own. We've been using a lot of because I'm sure you're curious, the Nolly archetype first off, and then the SLO 100, I think is the full name, the Soldano amp that dropped the same month that we tracked drums. And Eric and I were in the studio with James for this album in, I want to say, March of 21. And the SLO plugin had dropped just after that, and we messed with that, and that made its way on to the first single, Safe House, for a lot of the tones. And I think it's sporadically shared around the rest of the album too. Probably a bit of Pliny, a little bit of Petrucci archetypes as well. But yeah, just big fans of like all their stuff, to be honest.
Like a big, just mix mash. I can't talk in the morning of old ESP stuff. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it sounds good, especially when it's mixed into an album. It's like no one can tell the difference between whether it's real or not, quote unquote, real or not. Where were the drums recorded, and when did that happen?
I guess they happened March 2021.
Oh, so a while ago.
So we tracked them at this place called Machines with Magnets in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, with this guy Seth Manchester. He's an absolute babe. He's done like not really a lot of like metal record. I mean, like he's done metal, like he's done like Full of Hell and like The Body, Elizabeth Color Wheel and stuff like that.
Did he do something like Borns? Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's done the Battles records too, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, nice.
So like not anything like super metal. I actually went there like in the middle of like the first COVID summer to track some songs for another band, and it was just one of those things where like so much stuff was going on. I like learned the songs, and I was like, I'll just figure it out when I get to the studio, like what the setup is. And I like walked in, and I was like, oh, this is like real sick. And I just set up, and he's got like a really like kind of eclectic taste in microphones that I wasn't really seeing at other studios I was going to. Like he uses an old Altec, I can't remember the model name, but it's essentially like the old Elvis vocal mic is the snare top mic.
Interesting.
Which is like pretty cool. It has this like giant like input box and stuff. But like a lot of that just kind of intrigued me. And then like once we got to like, hit stuff, I was like, oh yeah, these drums are done. Like this sounds done like right now. And then I think I think within 30 minutes of me like getting sounds before I like did my first full take, I had already texted Sam and I was like, I know we're tracking drums for the record. Like, because it was just like really set up, and Seth is just like such a dude. And so when we did our drums there, I think we did it in 2 days or 3 days. I can't remember. But,
yeah,
wow, that's pretty.
We slept over.
Yeah, because there's an apartment connected to it, so it was just like get drums done, sleep, and then do more drums the next day. But it was really chill. Seth is like really accommodating with like, because unfortunately, we're like kind of annoying with like what we like and stuff, and we know a little too much to like just let him do his thing, where it's like, oh, really, that mic, so it was really accommodating and let us like try some stuff out before we hit record on the whole record. And then the way that we kind of approached drums for this record, which honestly wasn't really that much different from the other ones, because I kind of like I don't want to say I don't prepare, but I don't really like write like a ton of like, I'm not like writing things out and playing things note for note when I go into the studio for this band. But I had like pretty recently just done another record with another band I play in called Gargoyle, and like we were like incredibly meticulous about like the drum parts and stuff like that, and I kind of realized like, oh, like the music can benefit from that in a lot of ways. So there was way more like kind of like pre-composed stuff for this record than there was on the previous ones, which you can, at least for me, when I listen back, I can definitely tell that I just kind of like was bullshitting on a lot of things. but there's still like I still kind of like, there was definitely still kind of an improv element to some of it too, just because at least in my mind, like when I compose a lot of the music in Guitar Pro, I've been sitting with it for so long. I know where like all the syncopations are and all the rhythms are that I want to hit anyways. So I can kind of just play with that when we're at the studio and then find what works. And, I love the ego high of like tracking something and then them being like, oh, that's sick. And then we can kind of like work on it from there. And I generally like to kind of work on things really fast anyways, because if I do kind of think about it for a long period of time, my brain explodes. So it was more like a mental defense mechanism, I guess, for like not, having everything charted out. But I also think it's like, it makes the session more exciting, and we do find things like there's a lot of things on the record that we kind of discovered during the recording process that made it to the record that for me, I feel like just kind of happened in the spur of the moment, just because we're like in a cool space, like doing the thing. Yeah. But I thought it was really cool, and I think the drums sound sick. So
yeah, the production in general sounds great. That's really interesting that you're improvising, at least to some extent. I don't know. In my brain, I always think of this kind of music as basically being like classical music, where everything's like completely composed out, and especially since you only had 2 days in the studio, if you're improvising some, that's pretty good. How many takes? How many takes are you doing on each song?
Oh, I don't know. We did it until we got it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I didn't think there was like I'm not like one of those dudes that's like I'm gonna do the whole record one take. I don't.
Easy the album.
You do the whole album, no breaks, straight through.
I mean, I do kind of like I do know. I don't know how many takes, but I do know there was 1 or 2 songs that we just completely recut the second day. Okay. So I was like, it's not good enough,
I do remember that, yeah.
But it's just like, I kind of like that because like, especially with this music, and like, I do really like, I know everyone else hates it, but it's the only way I can do things at this point is like, I want to just like, once I start, I don't want to stop. Like, I don't want to eat. I want to just drink coffee and just go because like, especially for me, like once I start, like, my bones get all warm.
Catheter down there.
Catheter on, yeah, but it's like once I start, everything gets all warm, and then like to warm back up again after already being sweaty and gross is like I hate it so much that I'd rather just like I've done sessions before where like the engineer has gone to take a break, and I'll like go into the control room and like start like a 32 bar count in, and then just like keep going, because I'm not, I want to be respectful of people's time, but just like for me, it's just like I want to be in it from like the second I wake up until the second I go to bed, and then because otherwise my body just like kind of withers away if I like stopping and starting and shit like that. So
just as someone on the other side of the glass to hype James up again, like he gets that ego high from us saying how sick that section was, and then we get that motivation of him just wanting to keep going. So like what's fun for me is that our song Coma, the longest one on the album, just over 10 minutes, that the working title of that was song 1, so we just happened to start with that at the session because James wanted to. And we have a bunch of video clips of it, so I'm sure we could pull it up somewhere, but James is done with that massive takes, and we just hear him like, all right, James, what do you want to do? All right, let's do the next one, let's keep going. And it's like do you want a minute, like dude, like you're and like he's just like, that's how he works, and we get so excited by all that. Like, and I'll say like in general to the takes thing, it's probably like for this music, because he wants to keep going, like probably 3 or 4 like full takes, like tops of like the songs, and then if we want to go back and like punch in sections so he's gonna get really tight. And just one more thing for Seth too on those, if it is a section that James is like, all right, I want to like try this fill section again one more time or whatnot, Seth being an outsider, you might think this music is like, you said yourself, it takes a few listens to understand it outright. Hearing it for the first time in not even a completed form, probably like no vocals, just instrumental, all this stuff going on. Seth was surprisingly helpful in being able to just be like, hey, that wasn't good. Try that again. And we're like, and Eric and I will be sitting there like, yeah, we think that one was good. And he's like, yeah, that was good. So just having like an outside force, even in as small a capacity as that, like just for the drum tracking was a lot of fun.
Well, that sounds like it'd be fun to watch. Someone just go for it. Like, yeah. I get it though. You get in the zone sometimes, and then, you know, you'll look up and it'll be 3 hours later, you know. But I always feel bad for drummers in this kind of music because I'm assuming the guitars you guys self-produced on your own. You take your time with them. So he's got to like play all these songs, you know, in 1 or 2 days, and then you can go back and like.
That's how I want it to be, because like I said earlier, like I don't want to think about it for that. If I think about things that long, it starts turning the wheels like too much. I just give me a date and then I'll practice and then I'll do it, and then it is what it, you know, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, just I don't want that.
And then it's totally fine because we'll worry about it for 9 more months.
You'll go quantize it.
Yeah, exactly.
All that.
Yeah.
I just it feels like there's an expectation that everything has to sound as perfect as possible in this genre. So, and maybe that's a good and bad thing, I think, in some ways. But you know, so when like I'm recording guitars, it's like, okay, that's not good enough. You know what I mean? It's like got to do it again and again and again over and over.
It's an iterative process. If anyone takes anything away from this conversation, like we are actually, or at least I'm curious in trying to track some songs with our other guitarist, Eric, and get the guitars to a finished enough spot where we can be like, that is album ready. All right, James, what would you do to this? But even to that, I would say James' improvisation and like what he brings to some of that will like retrack sections or like rework something to like maybe a rhythm figure or some sort of thing that he did. So they're really, for me, it's like I want every stage of the recording, like when Richard's doing his piano, Werner's doing his bass, Adam's doing his vocals especially. We want every stage of the process, the songs to sound really full and exciting and all that good stuff. But if someone's laying something down and they have a good idea, like I think it's those two things. It's keeping things sounding exciting and like just moving quickly so we can make those decisions and be like, hey, that drum part actually made that thing work really, really well.
So when did the vocal parts come into the songs? Like, do you have vocal ideas before you're tracking drums, or is that something that comes on later?
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think for this band in particular, Adam is really, really good at writing top lines for music that like gets him excited. And I preface it in that way because our music is super complex.
Yeah.
And on a first listen, you might not know quite where to place maybe like a chorus or a verse or even how to label those sections at all. So the things that will come first, speaking for Adam now, would be some of the more straight ahead songs and sections that he gets the most like vibe out of. And he'll have like a top line. Like I know one, for example, in Blink, I want to say probably that dancey section towards the beginning or just the earlier part of the song was demoed really, really early, probably before the drums were actually tracked, along with some of the other poppier songs like Safe House, the top hook, for example. And then as the songs grow and get more developed, piano parts get added, guitar scratch tracks are more fully formed. Maybe the neural DSP settings are dialed in to sound a little better. That will start to influence him and get him inspired to add more to those. And then whatever he's not super confident on, like maybe some of the longer winded songs like sections of Blink and Coma, to name a few, that's where I sort of come in, and Adam and I put our brains together in well, it would be fun to go to a studio, but we have his studio, which is his bedroom and what we call the mattress fortress, which is a closet that is as soundproof as can be in his big house. And I'm on the other side of that door, just with, you know, these headphones and a little Apollo interface and a talkback mic, just throwing ideas back and forth. And I think on this album, more than any other, I actually contributed a ton of top line and backing vocal writing and also some recording. I'm very into the vocal layering sound as kind of like our, how many people we got? 7th member, I guess, of the band, 7th instrument, if you will. And yeah, actually adding some of my voice in layers beneath his, so we get kind of a different timbre from both. So yeah, kind of starts with Adam getting stoked about some ideas, and then as the songs need more and maybe get a bit more confusing, I step in and I start helping him, you know, get out of his comfort zone too, with like some of the screams that being a big one. I know he wanted to like get on this album once he heard that song Legend in its demo form, was like, hey, I'm gonna have to scream on this, aren't I, guys? Like, we'll figure it out later. Let's track the song. And then we did. And I'm pretty stoked. That one was one of the most difficult songs to fully see through to fruition. I think he likes saying that we did like probably like 7 or 8 different choruses for that song. And that being one of the heavier metal songs actually has 3 repeated choruses for us prog nerds trying to get repeated sections in there that makes sense. So
how dare you repeat the chorus more than twice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised how much prog actually uses like traditional song structures. I think there's this idea that prog is always just like through a compose straight through, but that's definitely not the case.
Or that we're above it for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, or that like the song has to be extra complex and long. But I think having catchiness in your songs is a lot more important than a lot of people like to think.
It's the human element for me. Yeah. Like, you want to talk to people and not like overwhelm them with all the information like we are right now.
Yeah.
With this interview. It's good to like have something to grab onto. Yeah. And especially because we're like actively trying to be a live band, I think is the other thing. We want to make sure there's some memorable stuff for people coming to see us for the first time.
And not everyone listening to your music is going to be a musician. You know, they're not going to be a guitar players. They might just be a casual music fan. And there has to be something that they can latch onto. I mean, even for me, I've only listened to the album a couple of times, and like, if you ask me what things that I can actually like, you know, repeat back to you right now, it would be
list your 3 favorite parts. Go.
But if I was to like say like what part do you remember, it would be a vocal melody probably more than anything else, because those are the things that automatically stick with you. You know,
of course.
My 3 favorite parts are actually I haven't listened to the album. I'm just
Nice.
The beginning, that middle part, and then when it's over.
I liked the part with the notes and with the beat.
You're not wrong. I don't know about that last part, but
so I'm curious, as someone who deals with this kind of stuff all the time, do you guys think about odd time signatures as you're doing it, or does it just come naturally?
Oh,
James, you and Richard had a interesting thought about this.
Yeah, we were talking about this recently.
Yeah.
But
Let's just rehash it. Go, James, go.
I don't remember. The only thing I remember you talking about, like, everything is 4/4 if you're not a nerd.
Yes.
Adam Neely.
Is that the conversation we had?
That's basically
that's part of, I think just like the idea of like, you know, when James writes something or just he feels something a certain way, and if that grooves and feels good and it happens to be an odd time signature, then that's just, you know, Bob Ross would be proud of the happy little accent. Like, that's just what it is. And then sometimes it's like, okay, we've got this sort of off kilter thing, but like, if it's not something that we can settle into, then maybe it's worth it to square it off a little bit and be like, you know, there's nothing wrong with 4/4. There's like, there's plenty of stuff that you can do within that framework. You know, I always use the example of like Kadinja as like a very modern band. It's like they write a lot of 4/4, but that's like the most syncopated stuff I've heard in like a hot minute for sure. You know, so but on the counter side, the example that I brought up last time we were talking about this was in the middle of the song Pine Knot. We have all these 5s, and it's like they feel great. You know, like it just it settles really well. So we didn't need to square that off.
Yeah.
Versus
sometimes we'll
some
groove.
spots and like in Blink, like a lot of Blinks in 4/4, but it's just so much syncopation going on within that it's like worth it to have it square up to have a sense of security, I guess.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this music coming from a drummer's yeah, exactly. Like, I think a lot of this music coming from a drummer's perspective too, like, first and foremost, gives like that like inherent groove to it. And I don't think somebody without James' sort of like fast-paced demeanor of like, I just got to get this out, like, would be able to do what he does in a program like Guitar Pro, because probably the only downside of that is he has to actually like type in what the time signature has to be there instead of being able to just feel where the song needs to go. But that's sort of like the 2 parts of his brain, at least. So when I'm getting them, I'm almost listening to these Guitar Pro sessions as like demos in their own right and not focusing super intently on like what the actual section time signature might be. Like, end of the day, that's all like information. Music theory is all like information or names to like identify how a sound is like working with another sound. And it's kind of up to you whether you like it or not. And so you listen to a lot of music, like James was saying, when we're back at Berkeley, we're listening to an album as homework. or just considering like our own casual listening as like information absorbing and stuff, and we're just like taking in what we like and don't like and leaning into that as much as we can. And then when we have to, you know, make guitar tabs for you guys to buy, or for Eric and I to learn how to play this music again, because we're so close to it, that's when we have to, you know, figure out exactly how to call it what it is. But it's just got a groove.
And that's the good point. Thank you, Sam. That's all. Is that like time signatures and a lot of things like that only matter when you're trying to write it down, when you're only trying to communicate it to someone else, when you get to the engraving stage. You know, like people love to argue on the internet and be like, oh, is this 7/8 or 7/4 or 6/8 or 3/4? It's like, well, like,
have you gone outside today?
Like if everyone in your band, if all your performers are feeling it and they're playing it together, it doesn't matter. It's just when you're coming down to engrave it that you need to make.
Yeah, I get those questions all the time because of my channel, which is like the total like nerdy side of like explaining this stuff. But people would be like, what is this? Is this 5 or 6? And I was like, well, it could be like a multiple different things, but like, how are you feeling? Like, you know, can you count it? You know, that's the main thing. Or being in a band doing this kind of music, I've done it before where like multiple musicians might be feeling it a different way. So if you have a click, you're like, how do we do the click? And you're like, well, I'm feeling it like this. And someone else is like, no, I want it to be like straight quarter notes. So I don't know. Everyone kind of, I think a lot of times will feel these sort of things differently. Have you guys dealt with?
James hates my clicks.
Have you dealt with that? Oh, it sounds like you've dealt with that then.
Yeah, clicks are the worst, dude. Yeah, the absolute worst.
I blame half of it on Pro Tools being super ornery,
dude,
but
it's so bad.
What's wrong? What's wrong
honestly,
with it?
You don't like when the part goes da 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 da.
Oh yeah.
No, so
yeah.
All right. I'm learning a lot about myself through this, but so I there is something about because there's two things I don't like about Sam's clicks. Is one, he
Sam made
the sound, actually we'll do that second. He doesn't subdivide every eighth note in like eighth note things. So if it's like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5, he'll do like the 1 3 5, and then the 7 will be an eighth note. So he's hitting the quarter notes and then the 1/8 note, right? I need all the things. I need all the, give me all the eighth notes. I want all that information. Sam doesn't do that, which I understand that from a guitar player's perspective, but like, no, I don't want that.
It's a half and half, but yeah.
And secondly, the sound he uses that like it's the woodblock number 2 or something.
It's called marimba accent and marimba 2, and it is the best.
It's horrible. Because I actually learned this about myself is or maybe this is all placebo, but I play so much better when it's just the stock Pro Tools like digital blip one. Like I don't know what it is, but that click is like God, because it's so like, it doesn't sound, the problem I have with the marimba one is it sounds too much like something that could actually be in a song. Like it sounds like a melodic thing, where it's like the Pro Tools one is like, that's such a gross sound. There's no way that would ever be in any, so it's easier to like pick out. And that's why I like it.
Well, you literally described like how we approach music differently. Like you're so focused on first of all, the pulse being in the right place. And second of all, the sound being disparate from the music that it's actually in. I think this is one of my like biggest problems as a musician, to be honest, and like probably why guitarists are Richard's like, what is he gonna say?
Ready.
Is like but like, you know, the common joke or whatever in the scene is like, oh, we'll have the guitarist mix it, right? Like so where I think that stems from is like guitarists and like tone hunters and people who are into that stuff, like we're so focused on how it sounds the entire time, almost like from the moment it's coming out of your fingers and like into your ears, like you're adjusting how you're fretting or like tweaking the tone on your amp or whatnot, or how loud it is in the mix. Like all of that stuff is important to you at the moment, when you would think as a player you should be just focused on playing the right notes and nothing else. And as a mixer and producer, I'm still listening. Well, what am I trying to say? I'm mixing and like taking in all this information as I'm playing, so I'm almost not focused as much on the playing as I should be. I'm almost immediately in like an endless loop, turning into a listener, a consumer of music as I'm playing. So it almost distracts me from the fact that James said that like my click kind of blends in with the song a bit more. I would say for me, it's one of the only clicks that I can actually hear above everything else because of the frequency or whatever. But like, that's not here nor there. The point being, it sits into the song so that I can actually not be distracted by the fact that I'm like keeping time. I'm one of those, I'm sure there's many others out there, people that are like, get a bit anxious when they see the red light turn on and start recording and playing. And the less you can feel like you're kind of under the microscope, I know James thrives on that, and we're built different in that way, which is cool. But the less I can feel like I'm being like, put under the microscope in that sense, like I'll perform better and get something that feels worthwhile. But yeah,
you should try the digital one, see how it goes.
I did, and I will sooner leave this earth than listen to that. But again, our weird pulses are about just the pulse, like how I'm feeling that section. Like, I'm not trying to go through every 5 or 7 or whatever nerdy number you want to say, feeling this like all the time. Sometimes I do like this ga 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 ga, like if that's the groove that we're trying to feel, like that it's like a clave or something, right? There's some word for whatever that is. Like those are grooves that we're trying to get, like if they're odd times, especially like people to vibe with, and that's why we put them in the songs, because there is a vibe to it. If it is not just,
you should reach a compromise. So you have all the eighth notes, you just accent the ones that you want, and then you got both.
Oh no, that's worse
for you.
That's worse.
All right.
Yeah, we use my sound every other click. Yeah, we go.
Yeah,
we solved it.
But I think you are right about the different metronome sounds, because I've found in live situations a couple of times I've done like really technical music live, that everyone in the band really needed like a super spiky, really annoying metronome to stay on track. Because like once everything gets loud and crazy, you start to like lose where you are.
We used to use a rim shot for shows way back in the day.
Oh yeah,
like a snare.
That sounds terrible.
I always thought it was helpful because it was like it sounded like it was part of the thing, and it was anyway.
Like super super bright like clave or something that's just gonna like stick out. But I do agree that.
What's the longest that you've spent talking about metronomes on your podcast before today?
If you watch, I have run like the nerdiest channel that exists on YouTube. Yeah. So probably multiple times.
I will say though that I to loop this back around, and then we can move on to
no, we're gonna talk about metronomes for another half an hour. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, until it clicks.
I got 2 more thoughts.
All right, I'm done. That's bad.
All right, there we go. Yeah. No, my other thing too is like I just, for some reason, I think this is like a total drummer thing, but I'm also to the point where I don't hear the click unless I like want to, or like if I'm audibly like off time.
That's true.
So I guess that's like why I also need something that's not that doesn't sound good, right? Because I almost want it to be like the sound when you mess up on Guitar Hero, like that egregious like string noise. Like I want it to be like, oh, you played off the 8th note, beep, beep, beep. Like,
and you want it to say you suck.
Yeah, I want instant punishment. So that's why that's why I choose the most unpleasant sound as my click track.
So we need to get you a screen next to your drums, and then just triggered by your drums, so when you make a mistake, it'll tell you.
Not just a shock collar, that'll do it.
The shock collar will do, yeah.
I've heard there was like there's some Nashville guys who are like touring drummers. They actually have some sort of thing that will tell them when their snare hits are like off, like not right on the beat, and they'll actually watch it and like try to be like completely right on.
That sounds depressing.
Okay. Yeah,
I used the watch one.
Okay,
if you're
like the one that like
sounds
pulses.
Yeah. That's the only other like weird click track thing I've ever used.
All right, enough.
That'll feeds into playing live.
Enough on.
Just tune it out when you need
it. So along those same lines, though, do you have any plans to tour?
We'd love to have plans to tour. Is the short answer.
Do you want to? I guess maybe. Do you want to tour? Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feeds into, like, in my opinion, every decision lately we've been making with the band is feeding into the fact that we want to perform this music live for as many people as possible. So whether that's like how we're releasing it through the waterfalling of the singles. We did 5 music videos. I think
crazy.
It bears repeating that even though drums were tracked back in March of 21, we started producing our videos for the album release at the start of 2022. So months of planning going into that and just kind of doing most everything ourselves, assisted by our great friend Brian Cray, great photographer, on tour with Monuments as well right now. And like bringing all that production stuff home because we have good ideas, but not the biggest budget. So trying to figure out how to minimize cost, but still make something super high quality. And it takes a lot of time, but all of that, again, focused on releasing singles with some time in between to try and get an audience to come along with us for the ride and be there for the album release. That just went over pretty well. And we're not trying to stop promoting it anytime soon, because we want to, book a tour or anything in that space as soon as possible, to be honest. We're probably looking at early next year for any sort of tour support, but we're in talks with various folks. We have lots of friends in the industry. James has played with many different bands. I'm sure I would waste the rest of the time of this interview listing them all. Again, like Richard being a recording artist for a lot of different artists as well. Adam being a top liner for a lot of people. Werner playing with lots of bands, and Eric doing similar session work. Like everybody sort of has their hands in a lot of different things, and we're just like trying to make the best product possible. So like we look the most attractive, to be honest, to any of these like acts that want to take us on, and like pull our weight and do something special for the people who really want to see us because they're out there.
And touring is so difficult these days and such a money pit too. So I'm sure whatever you do, you want to make sure that you're not going to like be 30 grand in the hole or something when you come out of it.
Yeah. Or when you start.
Yeah. Before you even leave. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So that's cool. If you guys ever make it over to Seattle, let me know. I'll show you around.
Yeah, we've heard that a couple of times actually.
Yeah. I'm sure
we played West Coast. We didn't make it up to Washington State last time we were West Coast. We did. I think the most north we got was LA. I think, really honestly.
LA and San Diego.
Like LA proper.
There's quite a few tours that don't make it up.
That I've done that. That drive just sucks because it's like once you're in California, it's like you got to go to LA, and then the next reasonable
Portland.
place to play is Portland. But if you want to go straight up, you got to go to SF, and that's 8 hours, and then.
Okay.
It's a big drive from San Francisco up to Portland or Seattle. 12 hours. Sort of thing.
Seattle. Like we were saying earlier, like I played Showbox twice this year, and like Seattle's cool.
Yeah, a lot of tours don't make it up here, which is kind of annoying, but and I don't
be closer.
Yeah. It's very nice up here. I'd recommend coming and checking it out. I guess along with the touring thing, and what do you think are some of the biggest challenges of being in a band in 2023 that you've come across?
Richard, what's the worst thing that's happened to you?
What's the worst thing I've ever done?
What's the worst thing you've ever done? That was it. I was so close. Oh man.
I mean, I would say. Oh, was I interrupting you, Richard?
No, please.
They're making.
Okay, I would say it's.
Oh, sorry. Was I interrupting?
I would say it's more.
Let me interrupt you. Let me stop you right there.
This.
I would say, this. I would say it's definitely more along the lines of like, there's so much stuff that you have to do aside from actually writing the music that like, especially for like a person who went to music school and like, I don't know how to do anything other than play drums. It's very hard for me to like kind of, I don't know if come to terms with that is the right way to describe it, but just like to realize it's like something like you kind of have to like extinguish your pride a little bit. Be like, I went to music school, So this might be a little bit of an isolated statement, but I think just kind of like the realization of just like there's more to it than just creating good music now. It's like that's almost like the one thing you have to do that's obvious, and there's all the other stuff that you have to do, like
we haven't done our daily social posts yet today, and that's giving me anxiety for no reason.
Yeah, right. Like TikToks and Instagram and like YouTube, and then just like, I mean, thank God we have Sam in this band to like make music videos, because I would have no idea where to start if we didn't have someone like that in this band. Like I would be petrified.
You have to pay for it.
Yeah, with money as opposed to emotional damage.
It's a trade,
which is usually both.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm kidding. But no, but so it's like, you know, there's just so much other stuff that goes into it, and then it's like, you know, it's 2023, and if you're starting a band, you're also not making money from the band, so then you have to juggle that with like whatever your other jobs are. And if you're a musician, it's like, okay, you have to go play music to fund your music, and then it becomes a challenge of like, you know, the creative well is only so full, so then when you get to the stuff you want to do, it's like, damn dude, I already played for like 8 hours today. There's nothing, I have nothing left to give, you know.
Like you think of the creative FOMO of just like being a human being on social media in general, and then just add being a musician to that, where like musicians weren't used to, like back in the days of the Beatles, like seeing how sick a tour was over in like New Zealand or something, like, or like how big that Queen or Van Halen show was. They would just, you would have to be there or you missed it. So there's that aspect, but like you're inundated with all of this stuff that you, and this is the word I use all the time, should be doing, and you feel as if you're missing all these different opportunities. So as excited, this is a bit of a me thing, as James said, like we each have our own sort of quirks and opinions on this, but like one of my favorite quotes from a guitar teacher from Berkeley, this guy John Finn, who's an awesome guy. He constantly told me to don't should on yourself because there's enough time. He also said get the tour, figure it out later, and like we're still trying to work on that. Like get the tour first, then figure out what you're going to do with it. But like the social media aspect and like being a brand more than a band is like something we're still coming to terms with. And like it's not all doom and gloom. Like we're sounding like, oh, like if anyone's watched I think it's The Social Dilemma, one of those Netflix documentaries about how like what social media is doing to our brains and stuff. And there's a lot of parallels there with how it feels to be a musician nowadays. But I'm excited about a lot of it because social media is social. Like it's a double-edged sword. It can be exhausting if you choose to absorb the information that way. But as long as we hear comments all the time, or read comments rather, on our Discords, on our YouTube videos, on our Instagram, and it's overwhelmingly positive. Like we're very lucky to be one of those bands that doesn't have a following that are just people like, hey, this is cool, or like dope, or like fire emoji. It'll be like, this song changed my life, is like the overwhelming consensus on a lot of comments. So like even in that we get a bit inundated because we see that so much, and it reinforces what we're trying to do. But like, yeah, that's the main thing for me, is like James said, being a social media brand as well as a musician in this landscape now is exhausting to say the least, but it's exciting when it feels good.
Yeah, there's total trade-offs to that. Like, you know, I think people think when you're going to be a musician, it's like you just go learn how to play music and like get as good as you can at your craft. But I wish that, especially when I was in school, that someone would have taught me like the business side of things, that someone would have, you know, told me how to promote myself, or, you know, do all these other things. Because I didn't think, I mean, people don't understand how being a self-producing musician of now, how many different things you have to do. It's like I'm not just playing guitar. It's like I'm a video editor, and I'm, you know, a mixing engineer, and I'm producing things, and all these things that I never thought I'd have to do at all, that I never prepared for. So there you go.
Sorry, just pulling out my music business and management degree.
Yo, that's a fake degree, man. They never gave me the real one.
Because I have an actual real one that says music production. They reprinted it, and I play that card anytime I can.
Dude, man.
Yeah, and
but it's the same thing.
The social media thing is great, because obviously technology is awesome. We can do this kind of thing, talk to someone across the other side of the country. But at the same time, you know, you turn on Instagram, you're just seeing like all the best players in the world all the time, and it's just like makes you feel like total crap. Like I can't even like play the guitar, you know?
Or like a song you're working on could be awesome and totally good enough and you see somebody doing some, like, what's that guy, Ichika or whatever, who does like the super tappy, like technical stuff. Like oh, all of a sudden my guitar part isn't good enough because it doesn't have enough notes. All right, I'm gonna go and we'll make these decisions. I'm sure we all make these like micro decisions based on like, I can't use this chord because it was in this other song. What? That has no basis in reality and like of the reality of what you're working on right there. So it's like most important for me to like be on a call or like having as much FaceTime with these guys as possible when I'm working on something, because when I'm left to my own devices, like all of those voices come out and they're louder than any positive voice I have in the back of my head telling me that this is all worth it and this is supposed to be fun at the end of the day. Like I have to like take a dose of reality every once in a while that like I have a roof over my head. I have like 5 other guys that want to actually be under one name making this kind of thing happen at the same time. So anyone struggling with that, just like find your people.
I think 90% of being a musician is just like crippling self-doubt all the time.
Oh, of course. And it doesn't go away.
It actually gets worse the better you get. That's something that I found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When,
that's the reward.
When you're like a cocky 18-year-old, you're like, I'm the best. And, you know, there's nothing I need to learn. And then as you get older, you're like, oh, I'm so terrible at everything.
I never thought I was the best. So that's a different kind of
that's probably a better place to be in.
Yeah, I'm the worst person in this band by far. Is my instrument.
No, you guys are all amazing, don't you?
Incorrect, but thank you.
Well, Richard's number 1. We're all tied for second.
That's fair.
He has a harpsichord in his room. That's why he's number 1. No, sorry.
You know.
Yeah, he's credited on the album with piano, harpsichord, Rhodes, and Wurlitzer. So he's got
and strings.
And strings. I would like that. Yeah.
Hey! I didn't get my Rhodes credit.
That's true. James played. Yeah.
But that one note.
It better say road, not road.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Hit my road
Singular
credits.
road. He played one note.
So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for chatting with me, guys. Where can people find you, support you, all that kind of stuff?
Sweet. We have a website.
New York. So just go. Yeah. Sorry.
Sam, you
James.
got it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, come find us. We finally have a website. www.aviation. Yes.
Social security numbers.
Yeah. Aviations Band is like our for everything. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok should be all Aviations Band. Our website as well, www.aviationsband.com. We have pre-orders still, considered pre-orders for our album because we have some physical stuff coming, which we're super proud of. We're trying to make it as like high quality as possible, it being our first like vinyl pressing, for example. Producer packs and guitar tabs, and if anyone's interested, and especially this audience, in breaking down our music, once you get a handle of it, you can download those immediately. CDs and all the usual stuff, t-shirts and other fun merch things. We're going to be updating that soon with more items and more things throughout the year. And yeah, that's going to be the spot. Instagram, I would say, is the place we're most active on right now. We're also doing a lot of Twitch streaming also at Aviations Band, but I think it's like, was it twitch.tv/aviationsband? You'll find us if you head to our website and use that Aviations
doing like
Band.
weekly unpacking of a song, like opening up the stems.
I did see that. It's very cool.
Taking people through them. So yeah.
Cool. Which I'm sure will be relevant for this, but we're doing another one tomorrow. If anyone's listening right now.
I don't think I'm going to get this out tomorrow. But...
don't think that's how
yeah.
It's Thursdays though.
Thursdays, okay.
Whenever.
Yeah, Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern for the.
Not tomorrow.
Will be the spot.
Thursday. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's a good time. Come through.
Anything else for me to get?
Hug your mom.
Hug your moms? Well, my mom lives in Alaska, but the next time I see her, I'll give her a hug.
Wow.
Oh, hell yeah.
I grew up in Alaska.
Nice.
Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
so you guys were in 30 Days of Night?
I wrote a.
Did you ever, do you have any friends that participated in the Iditarod?
I didn't have any personal friends that did, but I knew people whose like parents did or did. They did the Iron Dog, which is, that's the snowmobiling one where they do the same route, but on the snow machines.
Yeah.
I just want to play with sled dogs.
Awesome.
That's so sick.
My grandpa lived in a small, tiny town in the northern part of Alaska for a while. He was a missionary, and he would take his sled dog from town to town, like his sled dog team. That was the only way to get around back then. So,
dude, that's so sick.
Simpler.
How many times did you watch Balto when you were growing up?
Once, maybe.
Oh, man.
No, People get this idea. People get a weird idea about Alaska. I mean, I lived in like basically in the suburbs, basically. Had a normal house and TVs.
Yeah, but still,
it was just cold.
Pride in your state, you know.
Wait, outside of the Alaska connection, isn't that like on your like list of like top films of all time?
Yeah,
Balto.
Balto's amazing. Yeah, Balto's taxidermied corpse is in the Cleveland Museum of Natural History.
It's a great story.
Take a pilgrimage to pay respects. Yeah, I love that. Like the medicine was like glowing when it was on the sled. Like it was so magical. I love that the bear didn't have pupils when he attacked them. That was like the freakiest looking bear I've ever seen. Had great orange blue contrast in that scene too. It was really
I hit a nerve by saying I only watched Balto once. I should have said that I hate it and I never watched it.
Okay.
Man.
We'd watch it right
incredible.
now.
All right. I'll make my
Part
my
two.
children watch Balto here at some point. So
All right.
Thank you.
Follow up.
Appreciate
Let us
all
know
right,
if they
I'll
like
let you
it.
know.
Yeah.
All right, thanks guys.
At any rate,
Thank you.
thanks so much.